Spa is one of the most iconic circuits on the calendar. Senna has picked up some amazing wins. Nico confronted Hamilton. Häkkinen reminded Schumacher about his prior AS, and it's been here where Kimi celebrated as king. Nestled in the serene Ardennes forest in the mountains that extend up to Luxembourg, it's one of the most picturesque and best circuits on the calendar. And yeah, it's a litmus test to measure a diver's tenacity. And yeah, you wouldn't have to look much further than the Spa circuit. So we've decided to rank the top 5 races there, and starting off with number 5, and that's Daniel Ricciardo. You may have your favourites, but everyone's happy when Daniel Ricciardo picks up a Grand Prix win. You don't mind that. And amongst Ricciardo's most famous wins came at the Belgian Grand Prix. A dramatic action-packed race that saw the two imposing Mercedes of Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton looking strong, challenging each other for the top step of the podium, ultimately saw the Australian win. Back in 2014, it was war between the two Mercedes drivers, and going as wheel often in a saga that pushed the team to the edge and ultimately on the top step of the constructors' standing, although on this occasion a feisty contest aided their rivals Red Bull. But that's a Ricciardo will want to thank his stars, given the unfortunate collision between them. Well, in 2014, Ricciardo was in a machinery that was arguably quicker than Ferrari, Alonso and Raikkonen. He wasn't in contention for a realistic chance to win, given the frightening speed of the Mercedes, but the race would dramatically change right at the start inside of lap 2, when the Mercedes drivers came together at Les Combes, with Hamilton crying on the team radio, "Oh my god, I can't believe it, Nico hit me, guys." This led to Hamilton having to retire prematurely, and Nico would continue pretty much unscathed. Identically, it also promoted Ricciardo, who started 5th, to 3rd. From there on in, he would battle his teammate Vettel and Rosberg to the top step of the podium. What did make a pretty sight, however, was Rosberg booed on the podium as Ricciardo won. But in moving on to number 4, and that's 2017. As the F1 entourage headed for a mid-season break in 2017, the odds-on championship win rested in favour of Ferrari and Sebastian Vettel, following a strong and dominant performance at the Hungaroring. Vettel and Raikkonen garnering on a static Ferrari 1-2 feeling of the heading into the holiday spelled a great chance for Vettel. Hamilton, who'd last won Hungary in 2016, was denied what could have been a win, and had it not been for Ferrari imposing a speed, the former Iron Curtain. After all, what could be a better confidence booster than heading into the mid-season halt, seeing your name at the top of the rankings? Vettel was a happy man, and understandably so. Hamilton, on the other hand, was under pressure in order to snatch the advantage from his rival, and he bounced back superbly at this race. Right up to the resumption of the season, Hamilton stormed to a dogged and clinical triumph at Spa, winning the race by a margin of 0.6 of a second ahead of Ferrari's Vettel. But then again, it was said a few of Hamilton's M58 race victories were hardballed as a triumph at Belgium, snatching pole on a cloudy Saturday, and the Briton has also won the 2017 season, especially went on to grab the win in his 200th F1 race. Could it get any better for Lewis? But all throughout the competition, while there were interesting battles, the group between the two Finns, Bottas and Raikkonen, and the Force India drivers Ocon and Perez, Hamilton was successful in chipping away right at the start, maintaining the lead from the onset of lap 1. By the time he hit turn 1, Hamilton, the pole sitter, kept himself in hand despite an attacking Sebastian Vettel beginning from second behind. But by the time they went into lap 2, Vettel was beginning to look stronger, getting a great slipstream to pass Hamilton. And then at the Clan, the drivers almost the greats in the sport went wheel to wheel, with Hamilton keeping Vettel at bay. There was no therefore drama in the race, as Raikkonen was handing a 10-second stop go, failing to show under a double yellow, and the Force Indies colliding, eventually emerging unscathed from a sudden collision. By lap 17, Hamilton set a belt to his lap on a 1:49.1 and seemed the fastest man on the grid. He maintained the lead for more laps, and by the time the race exceeded the halfway stage, it seemed he had an answer for anybody. Around this time, the two Force Indies collided with each other again, prompting a VSC. Racing resumed on lap 33, and Hamilton led Vettel with the two clear fighters at the top in contention. Although Vettel had an outside chance to pass Mercedes, Hamilton kept fighting at the front. 1 lap later, Vettel, now barely half a second behind Hamilton, dived into the inside to pass Hamilton, only for a masterclass in the defensive driving. Then Raikkonen's pass on Ricciardo and Bottas during the same lap was epic. Eventually, Hamilton would keep his tail in front of the Ferraris. Mercedes reigned on top in an action-packed race. Number 3, 1985. The first race Senna won in his career came at Estoril at the Portuguese Grand Prix. His second win would come a few races later at Spa. Driving his latest Renault in only his second year at the pinnacle of motor racing, Senna clenched a vital career win in what would be a 43-lap contest. A visibly quicker car than the two Williams and Ferrari, Senna was able to attack right at the start. Ever since the beginning, second on the grid behind pole sitter Alain Prost. Inside the opening lap, Senna defended brilliant free from Nelson Piquet, whose Brabham spun around the corner. They effectively led the fighting duel of Prost and Senna continuing for the top step of the podium from the initial stage of the completion. He'd seen past the Professor, and Prost was also able to keep the charging Alboreto and Johansson at bay. In between, Mansell, who'd try and have a go at Senna, would understand the dominant pace of the latest driver and found himself to be no match to the Brazilian. In the latter half of the contest, Senna upped his game tremendously under the reins and gave no chance whatsoever to Prost, who failed to mount a comeback and fell behind the two Williams. In winning his maiden triumph at Spa, Ayrton Senna tasted the champagne from the top step of the podium, a true great of the sport, relishing a great track to the end, and yeah, it kind of was requisite to see how good Senna would become. Moving on then to number 2, and that's 2009. He might be called in celebrations as the Iceman, but out here in Belgium wilderness, Kimi is hailed as the King of Spa. Having picked up some of his most famous wins at the Grand Prix of Spa, Kimi worked hard to cement the unflappable reputation, and one of the best pieces of evidence was his masterclass in 2009. The 28-year-old was driving in his final year at Ferrari before he'd been shown the door for an incoming Fernando Alonso, so it was emphatic by all accounts that the only win would pick him a track that he calls his favourite. The most standout moment for Kimi was in the form of a stellar move on Fisichella at a corner that's not called the most glamorous but also the most challenging position on any racetrack. Aided by a visibly balanced machine, Raikkonen then in his F60 got the better of Fisichella around Eau Rouge to put himself into first. From there on, Fisichella would have no realistic chance of beating Kimi, who would chip in and pick up an easy win. But while Raikkonen was still behind, there was lots of going on behind. We're having passed Hamilton in the mid stages. It cannot be denied that his curse was an advantage, but it earned him the win. Moving on into number 1, and that's 2000. The greatest thing about F1 isn't just the glamorous and picturesque setting and a magnificent world titles. Rather, the greatest thing about the sport is the spectacle of unstainless and thrilling overtakes. A great example of which was the 2000 Grand Prix at Spa. About 23 years ago, with both Schumacher and Hakkinen being at their peak, the latter demonstrating an awe-inspiring moment, who would seem to be ever certain to win the Grand Prix. What transpired on that 41 right at the finishing stages a few laps before the checker flag was a move that's been hailed by contemporary and past F1 drivers as being amongst the greatest feats attained in the sport. In a reversing tide on a cloudy Sunday, the icicle Finn exalted the result of a ballsy manoeuvre, getting past seemingly fast Ferrari of Michael Schumacher, his arch driver on lap 41. But what was great about Hakkinen's feat was clearly driving on the outside and the more spacious part of the track. Then leader Michael Schumacher, the Finn dived into the inside and stormed his way through to gain the lead of the race. A couple of laps between the checker flag, Mika's pacey McLaren jumped into the lead and blasted past the finish line amid awe-struck fans, with perhaps Schumacher being one of them, as he admitted in the aftermath of the fantastic racing at Spa. Moreover, that was great about Hakkinen's 2000 triumphs was that he'd, having taken pole, he'd spun around and had fallen behind in the pack and would fight his way through, ultimately winning one of his most incredible races. But anyway guys, that's it for you. Thanks very much for watching. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and else comments down below. If you want to share daily F1 news and subscribe to my channel, I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks very much for watching. Peace out.